Welcome.
It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to another edition of Rico Brogna. We appreciate you downloading the Rico, checking out the Rico. We are recording this, believe it or not, right after the classic game between the Detroit Tigers and the Seattle Mariners, Game 5 of the American League Division Series. It's funny. I said to Hoff, we're going to do a Rico live on YouTube Friday night. It'll be able to be downloaded Saturday morning, and we'll do it right after the Mariner-Tiger game because I found myself very excited about Mariners-Tigers. I didn't have any rooting interest whatsoever. It's been a really competitive series. You've got this ace in Tarik Skubal starting a Game 5, two franchises that are very non-offensive to all of us. So I found myself very excited about watching Game 5, and it turned into an absolute classic. I don't know how many people watched it from the beginning, but I'm sure if you're a baseball fan at some point, you checked in and said, what's going on? And then you probably hung out. I actually scored the game, which I guess I'm embarrassed by. At this age, I don't score that many non-Met or Yankee games. But this was special. It was a Game 5 of the Division Series. So I spent 5 hours watching a classic baseball game, and I'll give you a couple of Met-related perspectives, and then we'll get into today's edition of the Rico. There's a few things we'll hit on, the Yankee and Philly losses and how their off seasons can intertwine with us, the New York Mets. We will get into that, and we'll also take a look at the Syracuse train. We'll be handing out grades to the Syracuse train. What is the Syracuse train? Those are all the different relievers that would come up, go down, come up, go down. We gave them their own separate category. So we will get to that on today's edition of the Rico Brogna as well. But watching Mariners-Tigers was another reminder, and I've had a lot of these over the last week and a half, that as much as I'm disappointed that the Mets aren't playing playoff baseball, oh my God, the stress levels of watching a game like that, the stress levels, if that was our team, either one of them, I mean, the Tigers or the Mariners. If I'm a Mariner fan sitting there at Safeco, I know it's T-Mobile Park now, but I'll always call it Safeco. How many times am I wasting 2 on nobody out in extra innings? How many times? And if I'm the Tigers, how many times am I escaping 2 on nobody out in extra innings and not being able to put any real big rally together outside of the 12th where I've got a chance to score a run and win this game? So it reminded me that while I watched it and I enjoyed it, it's so much less stressful when the Mets aren't involved. The other thought I had was about Tarik Skubal. Obviously, I think we would mostly all agree that he is the best pitcher in Major League Baseball today. You look around this sport, the combination of age, stuff, stats the last couple of years, he's the number one of number ones. And he's also a free agent at the end of next season. So it's only natural that we as Met fans, if you're watching Tarik Skubal pitch, or if you glanced at this game, or even if you didn't, when you think of the Mets acquiring pitching help, and we're going to certainly do many Ricos discussing that throughout this offseason, whether it's free agency or trades, Tarik Skubal is one of those guys that jumps to the top of a dream list. Why would Detroit trade him? Well, they would trade him if they decide we're not going to be able to pay him at the end of the 2026 season when he's a free agent. So I'm watching him in this game, and he's brilliant. I mean, he's utterly brilliant. The Mariners did a great job of working long at-bats against him, but he's striking out 7 guys in a row, setting a postseason record, and he ends up striking out 13 guys in 6 innings. His pitch count is 99. And you hear on the broadcast, Ken Rosenthal, and I was even Googling it as well, what's the deal with Skubal going deep into games? And the reality is he doesn't throw many more than 100 pitches. Like he's kind of in that range, 100, 105. Now, this is a Game 5, season's on the line. So my assumption, and I think most people watching's assumption would be, well, you're going to push it. There is no tomorrow. You've got your ace on the mound, and you have a lead. I mean, think about it. The Tigers took the lead in the top of the 6th inning on the 2-run home run by Kerry Carpenter. Skubal comes out. What does he do in the bottom of the 6th inning? He pitches a 1-2-3 inning. So I'm thinking, all right, they're going to push him. And Skubal gets taken out with the thought also being he's very honest with A.J. Hinch and will tell him, I'm done. So I ask the Met fan, we still want to trade for him, clearly. He is an ace of aces. So to me, that's easy. But are you going to be good with that? That's my question. Are you going to be good with an ace, the best pitcher in baseball, taking himself out after 6 innings because his pitch count is at 100? Now, my answer is definitively, yeah. I mean, I have to accept that that's what pitching is in 2026. And while I don't like it, I'm not sitting here excusing it. I accept it. But I just want every Met fan, the old school Met fan that listens to the Rico, the new school Met fan that listens to the Rico, who usually will complain, I do it too, how did he come out after 5? How did he come out with a pitch count of 97? I just want you to know that it's possible in this dream fantasy world of the Mets trading for Tarek Skubal, they're giving up everybody. They're giving up Brandon Sproat. They're giving up Jet Williams. They're giving up Carson Bench. Dare I say they're giving up Nolan McLean. And when they do that, and everybody's really, really excited about it, and then the Mets somehow, David Stearns breaks his rule of not giving long-term contracts into their 30s to starting pitchers, but they break that rule because he's special, and they give him a 9-year contract, and they pay him, what is 9 times 40 per year? $360 million? When they do all of that, and now it's a playoff game, and he's coming out at 99 pitches after 6, what's your reaction going to be? And I already know the answer. The reaction's going to be, what the F is that? I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a big Tiger fan, and which is why I found myself rooting for the Tigers, because I am a compassionate human. And I almost want to read what he said about Skubal, because I think it's worded in a way in which you appreciate him, but you're frustrated. I have to find it. Here it is. I'll never forgive Skubal not pitching the 7th, but I'm still hopeful. Actually, I take that back. He was pissed. And I get it. And that's why I bring this up to all of us right now. Like, the Mets are going to pursue, or at least we want them to pursue, an ace, right? That's the dream. Whether it's Tarek Skubal becoming available, which I'm not even thinking he will be, but in this fantasy world where the Tigers think they can't pay him, he's available. What are we going to think of something like this? And I think we're going to think the way my buddy thinks, which is we're going to be pissed. We're going to say, what the hell is that? I remember we did that with DeGrom. It was the same thing. He's a 6-inning pitcher. Now, I think what we need to do in 2026 is accept that that's the norm, that if you want to get 8 innings out of a starting pitcher, whether it's Skubal or it's McLean or it's anybody else, it has to be economical, which is why the Mariners did a really good job of battling him and working deep counts. It's a part of why when you think about building a baseball team, and we are now in the offseason structure of trying to rebuild the New York Mets, having guys that work deep counts, having guys that can battle and foul pitches off, even if ultimately the at-bat ends in a strikeout, is a real value. So keep that in mind about Skubal and any other ace we talk about over the next few months. How are you going to feel inevitably when that man comes out at 99 pitches in a playoff game after 6 brilliant innings? And I'll give you one last thought about this before we move on to other stuff. The way I would have handled this is, all right, Tarek, you may have left it all out there. Give me another batter and go a batter at a time. But to take him out after he had retired, 14 in a row and struck out how many of them? That's a tough one. Is it ultimately why the Tigers lost this game? I mean, it contributed to it because their bullpen was the one that gave up the lead in the 7th inning, even if their bullpen proceeded to keep it tied for the next 8 innings or whatever it turned out to be. All right, let me get to the Phillies and Yankees. And the reason I bring up the Phillies and the Yankees is not to rub their noses in their defeat and say, welcome to our world, even if their seasons were more successful. I want to bring up a couple of players that can become available from the Yankees and the Phillies and have a conversation about it. I want to start off with Giancarlo Stanton. I put out a tweet the other day, and I offered no context. Maybe I did that on purpose. I was going to supply the context right here on the Rico, which I'm about to do. And it was just hey, who says no? Giancarlo Stanton for Mark Vientos. I think we all realize that trade is not happening. I think we realize that the Mets are not trading Vientos for Stanton, and the Yankees are probably not trading Stanton at all. And we also realize that Giancarlo has a full no-trade clause, which is a part of why he ended up with the New York Yankees. He refused to go to San Francisco. He refused to go to St. Louis. He ended up with the New York Yankees. The reason I brought it up is because one of the difficult discussions that we're having in this offseason is not simply about a starting pitcher and their ERA or run prevention or improving this lineup. It's about the locker room, and it's about leadership. And a couple of Ricos ago, we went through some of the stories that have come out since this disaster of a season ended, really saying there isn't anything wrong with the locker room. Maybe they lacked some leadership. Maybe they missed J.D. Martinez. Maybe they missed Jose Iglesias. But it's not like the locker room is a problem, per se. It's not that Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor hate each other. It's that maybe they lack leadership. I think it has become very obvious, whether people decide to pay attention to it or not, that Giancarlo Stanton is an incredible leader for the New York Yankees. And there was a story, and I really wanted to bring it up on the air, and I did on WFAN because I thought it was very interesting and important. But I'm not sure it got a lot of attention. And it's a story that came out in The Athletic about Giancarlo Stanton essentially calling a players-only meeting right after the Yankees were in the middle of a funk and they had just lost a brutal game to the Texas Rangers. And he decided to rip into the team. I just want to read part of this article for you because I thought it was interesting. In an August 4th meeting, which followed a brutal walk-off loss to the Texas Rangers at Globe Life Field, Giancarlo Stanton laid into his teammates while also challenging them to play up to their talent. One member of the Yankees who spoke on the condition of anonymity, granted so he could speak candidly, said it was unlike anything he had ever seen before, especially coming from Stanton, whose public comments often come off as measured. Quote, I knew we were so much better than that at the time, Stanton told The Athletic. Thursday night, as the Yankees' champagne-soaked celebration of their 2-1 wildcard series win over the arch-rival Boston Red Sox raged in the clubhouse. It was going to take a lot more than effort to be able to have moments like this. The imposing slugger continued nodding throughout the party. I want every Met fan to think about this. You think the Mets could have used that this year? You think they could have used someone challenging them at some point? You pick your time. I mean, you could pick any time this season to do that. Let me read a little bit more. The loss in Texas prompted Stanton's speech, which was particularly gut-wrenching, featuring a blown Yankee lead in which Devin Williams surrendered a game-tying solo shot in the ninth, and Jake Bird gave up a 3-run shot, blah, 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 blah. Anyhow, Stanton's speech had its intended result. Quickly, the mood around the Yankees, quote, definitely changed, Judge said. Despite occasional struggles, they finished the regular season 34-15, best record in the major leagues over that span. Here's the captain, Aaron Judge. It was good for everybody to hear and for all of us to kind of look in the mirror like, hey, am I really giving it my best? Am I really giving it my all? Time to turn around and get things moving. I like to find common ground with people. So when I say trade for Giancarlo Stanton or, hey, Giancarlo Stanton makes a lot of sense, I get it. $20 million. He's a DH. You're so stupid, Evan. They could use that money better. I get it. But there's context, and that's the context. And so here's what I want to ask everybody, and think about it, because it's complicated. There's no easy answer. Could the Mets use that? How do we measure that? How do we know which players provide that? But the key question is, could the Mets have used that? And I think it's undeniable that the answer is yes. So I see that story, and I get I'm closer to the Yankee situation than I am the Royal situation, to know who's a leader in that room, to be another target for the Mets. But you hear a story like this, and we all know what he can still contribute on the field. And my reaction to reading it, besides the Yankee tilt that I was going to talk about on the Fan, was, Mike, that's what this team needs. They need a leader like that. And those are tough to find. They're tough to define. They're tough to kind of go through rosters during the offseason and say, him. So I hear that story and I say, boy, if the New York Yankees, 2 years away from this contract running out, would really move him, they would really move him because they want more flexibility on their roster or whatever reason they want, and they don't value that in the room, then I think it would be foolish to not make a phone call and be interested in a player like that because it serves a few purposes. Number one, is he a useful baseball player? Absolutely. Is he the guy he was 5 years ago? No one's saying that. But he was very productive this year when he played, can still go out there and play the outfield a few times, not often, but a few times. And the DH spot has not exactly been a warm, cuddly place for us as Met fans. So if the Yankees were willing, and Giancarlo was willing, because he does have a full no-trade clause, yeah, I'd be interested. And for those that wonder, but Evan, is that money well spent? You know, it's $20 million a year. Is that really well spent? Look, know in the context of stats, know in the context of run prevention, obviously. But how do you value that kind of leadership? And do you think the Mets could use leadership like that? That's the thing that's worth thinking about. So that's my Yankee connection. It's not about rubbing their nose in on the fact they got knocked out by the Blue Jays. I know a lot of Met fans are very happy about that. Great. Now let's get to the Phillies. I'm not here to make fun of a Ryan Kerkering or mock the fact they got knocked out. And basically every year they've taken a step backwards from losing in the World Series in 22 to blowing the NLCS in 23 to losing to us in 24 to now a heartbreaking loss in 2025. I'm here to talk about the conversations they're having and how it relates to us. What do you think Philly fans are talking about? They're talking about their core. They're trying to figure out, do we have to change our core? And remember this about the Phillies core. It's all bought players. When they were being marveled at in 2022 and the city of Philadelphia was falling in love with them, I love to point out, like, yeah, I mean, you can fall in love with them. It's a completely bought team. Like every single guy in that core, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, Nick Castellanos, they're all bought free agents, like all of them. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We have some bought free agents, but it ain't our entire core. And so that core was beloved. It had success. And obviously, those guys like Kyle Schwarber and Trey Turner have failed in major ways the last couple of years. So their conversation is, we need to break up the core. Their conversation is, we need to do something major. How does this relate to us? Here's how it relates to us. They may not want to re-sign Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto. Let me start with JT Realmuto. I think he's closer to done than his prime. And unless I'm blown away on an Alvarez offer where there's some kind of trade package, maybe it goes back to Tarik Skubal where it's like, oh, Alvarez is in a deal like that. I'm not pushing to go after JT Realmuto. The Kyle Schwarber thing is a lot more interesting because I've heard, not with the same vigor or stories about Stanton, but I've heard that Kyle Schwarber is a great leader in that Philly room. And again, if we're talking about leadership and we're talking about adding that to this room or at least changing what's in that room, Kyle Schwarber would be a change. But the appealing thing about Kyle Schwarber is that he's a slugger. And if the Mets are really going to move off of Pete Alonso, which I hope they don't, I think I've made that very, very clear, they could replace his offense with Schwarber, make him the full-time DH, and then go improve first base defense elsewhere. Would I prefer that? The answer is no. I wouldn't prefer that. First of all, Pete's a couple of years younger, number one. Number two, even if you want to make Pete more of a designated hitter to improve your run prevention and your defense, I still hold out hope that as long as you pay Pete what he believes he's worth, he'll come back and DH half the time. And the reason I have some level of confidence in that is I look around the sport and I look at other teams. I look at the Phillies. I think they're a major candidate to go after Pete Alonso. If they're going to change their core, if they're going to let Kyle Schwarber walk, if they're going to let JT Realmuto walk, if they're going to deal off Nick Castellanos, they're going to have to replace that production. Would I be stunned if they signed Pete and moved Bryce back to right field or had Pete DH most of the time? I wouldn't be. I think, and you could save the tape on this, there's at least a possibility, if not a high possibility, but certainly a smallish possibility that the Mets and the Phillies are swapping superstars. Pete ends up in Philly and Kyle ends up with us. I don't prefer that. I am not endorsing that. I'm talking through it. I'm talking through the pluses and the minuses. Contract-wise, I kind of feel they're going to end up with similar deals, even though Pete plays a position, though not incredibly well or highly regarded around the sport. I still happen to think Pete is an average defensive first baseman. I thought he had a bad final month. But does the league view him that way? I'm not sure. But I think the Phillies are a weird threat right now because they're going to do something major. And maybe it's firing Rob Thompson and going out and hiring Bruce Bochy. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's possible. But I think they're going to change their core. And I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to let Kyle Schwarber go. And I wouldn't be surprised if they made a push for Pete Alonso. So I'm glad the Phillies are gone. I want to get that out of the way. But I did have those thoughts about Schwarber and how he could make sense. And look, my biggest concern, because I'm going to take the emotion out on Pete, the whole homegrown stuff, I'm putting that aside. And I'm going to try to do that for the duration of this offseason. I'm going to do baseball, like baseball team, what makes them better conversation with Pete. My biggest concern when you lose him is how you replace the offense. This was an offense that wasn't good enough this year. We could blame the pitching all we want. They did not score enough runs. They didn't score enough runs in game 162. And quite frankly, when you look at the totality of the season, they did not match the expectations we had for this offense. I've said it a lot so far on these offseason Ricos. They scored fewer runs than they scored the year before. How anyone could find that acceptable is beyond me. So if you lose Pete Alonso, if you decide to walk away from Pete Alonso, how are you replacing his production? You can improve defense at first base all you want. You're taking away nearly 40 home runs and 120 RBIs. How are you replacing it? Kyle Schwarber replaces it, and he allows you the ability to get better defensively because he's just your DH. We'll go deeper on this in a couple of weeks, a Pete replacement Rico Brogna, but certainly a thought when it comes to Kyle Schwarber. Now, let's hand out some more grades. We've already handed out grades for the offense. If you missed it, that was episode 565. We handed out grades for the starting pitchers. That was episode 566. And today we are going to look at the Syracuse train. Now, let me give you some perspective on the Mets' usage of the Syracuse train and how many pitchers the Mets employed in 2025. They used 43 real pitchers. And when I say real pitchers, that means I'm not including Jared Young, who pitched once, Luis Torrens, who pitched twice, or even Travis Jankowski, who pitched once. They used 43 real pitchers. And if you want to look at just the people that relieved, and you want to take out the openers like Hagenman and Waddell and Davinsky and Garrett and Brazoban, they had 17 guys make a start. But if you take away what I would say are the 5 openers, that leaves you 12. And since there were 43 pitchers and 12 of them made starts, let's do the math. In fact, I have to do the math with you. That leaves you with 30 guys that exclusively appeared out of the bullpen. Take Clay Holmes out. He wasn't a reliever despite 2 appearances out of the pen. Take Sean Manaea out despite 3 appearances out of the pen. You're looking at nearly 30 real relievers. But they had a lot of guys that went up, and down. And it's about time we honor those guys. So we're going to hand out grades. We're going to give you the history of the Syracuse charter. That's what we should call it, the Syracuse charter. Or the Syracuse train. Probably the Syracuse train. And we are going to pick our Syracuse trainer of the year. because those guys were valuable, man. They came up, they went down, they ate innings, they did a lot. So let's start off with the guys that you forgot about. Let's start off with Wander Suero. Wander Suero was added to the roster on September 4th, and then he was DFA'd on September 7th. So he was here for 3 days, and he didn't pitch that time. And then they brought him back on September 18th, and he was DFA'd on September 20th. Wander Suero. Do we even remember Wander Suero? Like, does he actually exist? Well, he did. And because he barely existed, I don't even know what grade I would give him. Let me see his complete stats for the season. Wander Suero with the New York Mets. Did he actually never get into a game? I can't even find him on Baseball Reference. Is it possible that he was added to the roster and never got into a game? Holy crap. Yeah, he never pitched. I find that really hard to believe. I could have sworn he pitched an inning. I guess he never got in. All right, Wander Suero, because you never pitched, though you were on the roster on 2 different occasions, I'm going to give you just a high. How are you? Then we've got Dom Hamill. Dom Hamill made 2 trips on the Syracuse train. He was added on August 4th, where he was on the roster and never made his major league debut. And then he was added back on September 13th and was here for 5 days. He got into 1 major league game and pitched 1 inning, put a bunch of guys on base, and got out of it, but never allowed a run. So Dom Hamill was able to put together a major league ERA and have it at 0. Dom Hamill, I have to give you, you know what? I can't even grade these guys. You know what? We're going to go through every single one of them, tell you how many times they were here. And I think for most of them, I'm just going to say thank you for your service, because I don't even know how I would give Dom Hamill a grade. Let me get to a guy who I was thinking about not including on the Syracuse train, because he was on this roster all the way until July. But then the Mets sent him down and decided to put him on the train 4 different times. I'm talking about Huascar Brazoban. Huascar Brazoban was on the team until July 29th. He got sent down so they could stretch him out, came back on August 23rd, got sent down on August 27th, was called up on September 11th, was set down on September 13th, and then came back on September 18th. Huascar Brazoban was good. Like, he actually ended up making 52 appearances this year, which was 4th on the team. He pitched to a mid-3 ERA, and he had a lot of good. He had some bad, but I would say more times than not, Huascar Brazoban was one of their more dependable bullpen arms. And that's why sending him down to begin with was kind of strange, but the purpose was to stretch him out. So I am going to give Huascar Brazoban a grade. I'm going to give him a B. I mean, I thought that was actually a solid year from him. Again, when you look at the inconsistencies of a lot of guys in this bullpen, Reed Garrett, who we'll get to when we go to the other relievers, I thought Brazoban was pretty good. How about this guy? Do you remember Alex Carrillo? He was only on the Syracuse train once. He was called up on July 8th and was sent down on July 25th. He got into 3 games and gave up 7 runs and 4 home runs in 4 2/3 innings. I think at some point, if you go back into the archives on the Rico, there was a day in which I was screaming, "Get Alex Carrillo off my team." Well, he was only here once. He was here for that 1 trip, and it was really, really bad. I am going to give him a grade. That's an F. Next up on this list is a guy who, I love the guys who are only here for 35 seconds. Do you remember Zach Pop? Zach Pop got into 1 game, pitched an inning and a third, gave up 3 runs, and took the loss. It was his only appearance here, and he was only on the Mets for, get this, 2 days, July 5th and July 6th, and he got DFA'd. We hardly knew ye Zach Pop. Now, one of our favorites, one of the guys that I think it was just very frustrating that he didn't spend more time here. And that, of course, is the namesake of this podcast, the great Rico Garcia. Rico Garcia had 2 stints with the New York Mets. And what was crazy about this is he pitched really, really well with the New York Mets. In fact, he ended up making 6 appearances with us. And in 5 of the 6, he never gave up a run. He was great. But in the middle of being with us, the Mets DFA'd him, and he very quickly went to the New York Yankees, where he had a bad appearance. He got bombed the one time he pitched for the New York Yankees. But for the Mets, on July 6th and July 10th, he pitched 2 scoreless innings against the Yankees, 2 2/3 scoreless against the Orioles. Then when he came back 3 weeks later on July 22nd, pitched a scoreless inning against the Angels, actually got a hold, pitched 2 scoreless against the Giants, pitched 2 scoreless against the Padres, and gave up a run in 1 inning against the Padres, and then had 2 more appearances at home against the Giants, and then he was gone again. He was one of those Syracuse train pitchers in which when he got DFA'd and sent down, we weren't happy about it because we were like, that guy's pretty good. Rico had, like I said, 2 different stints with us. Now, the next guy I'm going to mention, I have to admit, and this is kind of crazy when you remember how geeky I am and I score every game and we do Rico Brognas after every series. It is not excusable for me to legitimately forget that someone existed. But I've got someone. He only made 1 appearance. Maybe that's why. His name is Jonathan Pintaro. You guys remember Jonathan Pintaro? Because honestly, when I saw him on the list, I was like, when was he on this team? Jonathan Pintaro made 1 appearance. It was actually to finish off a game, or I think he tried to finish off a game. He pitched 2/3 of an inning, gave up 2 hits and 2 runs in a 7-3 win against the Braves all the way back on June 25th. So I guess if I go into I've got my scorebook right here. I guess if I go to July 25th, I'll see his name and be like, oh yeah, that guy exists. I'm going to pull it up right now. Because why not? Doing a Rico Brogna in the middle of the offseason, and we're recording it at 2 a.m. So me stopping the podcast to look at my scorebook is no biggie. July 25th. Oh, I said June 25th, didn't I? Yeah, June 25th. Yeah, June 25th was a Wednesday against the Atlanta Braves. The Mets were on a 3-game losing streak. Clay Holmes pitched 5 pretty solid innings. And then in the 9th inning of this game, with the Mets up 7-1, they went to Jonathan Pintaro. He walked the first guy, gave up a hit, got the next 2 guys out, then gave up a 2-run hit to Ronald Acuna Jr. and walked Matt Olson. And finally, Carlos Mendoza said, what are we doing? Let me go to Edwin Diaz to make sure this game doesn't get out of hand. That, of course, the great Jonathan Pintaro. Then we get to a guy who had 3 different stints with us. Richard Dickey Lovelady. June 23rd through the 25th, July 2nd through the 10th, and September 20th to the 25th before he got DFA'd. He actually got DFA'd twice. Dickey Lovelady. I think he's probably most remembered for the name, though he did eat a bunch of innings at the very end of the season when we were trying to save our bullpen. Then you've got Tyler Zuber. Tyler Zuber had 1 appearance with us this year, or 1 stint with us this year, between June 21st and June 23rd. The great Tyler Zuber. I remember reading more about him, like in spring training and as a bullpen option. I remember that a heck of a lot more than actually seeing him pitch at the major league level. But I'll tell you what Tyler Zuber did with us. He made 1 appearance, and he gave up 2 runs in 2 innings. So it was a few days with us, and it was only 1 appearance. Can't give him a ranking. Then we get to one of my favorites, Justin Garza. Justin Garza was sneaky good, and he had 3 different roster stints with the New York Mets. June 9th to the 15th, June 17th to the 21st, and July 22nd and 23rd before the Mets finally said, we are going to DFA you. If I'm not mistaken, and I have the papers in front of me to prove this, I think Justin Garza won a Rico I'm the Man right now star of the series. I kind of feel like he did. There was a game in which he came in and ate up some innings, and we were all very happy. But the next guy on my list definitely won a Rico I'm the Man now star of the series. This guy made 3 different roster appearances for the Mets in 2025, and that is left-handed reliever Jose Castillo. Now, Jose Castillo did something really unique. We've mentioned a few guys who were DFA'd twice. Jose Castillo got DFA'd not once, not twice, but 3 different times. May 15th to June 25th, he was here. So over a month, got DFA'd. Came back exactly 1 month later on July 25th, spent 2 days with the Mets, got DFA'd. And because we love irony, came back again exactly 1 month later, August 25th to August 30th, and he got DFA'd. I will give Jose Castillo a grade because he was useful when he was here. Another one of those guys that if the roster crunch didn't exist, may have been able to stick around more. I think I'd give Jose Castillo a solid C. One of those decent C's. Next on this list is another guy that, honestly, if you blinked, you don't remember he was here. He was here for 2 days, 1 stint. We're talking about Colin Poche, the left-hander, and he sucked his 1 appearance here. He was so bad that after his 1 appearance, we all screamed, "Get rid of this man." And he was promptly gone. Next on the Syracuse train was a guy who I didn't think would be on the Syracuse train because he was a prospect, but ended up on the Mets 3 different times, and that would be Blade Tidwell. Blade Tidwell's stint, of course, ended when, while in the minor leagues, he was traded to the San Francisco Giants in the trade for Tyler Rogers. He ended up making a couple of starts. He was here May 4th. He was here June 20th to the 21st, and then June 27th to July 3rd. Another guy who was on the Syracuse train who we didn't think would be was Dednell Nunez. Boy, certain guys fall. Certain guys you have high hopes for, and you just know health isn't going to hold up. That was the case with Dednell Nunez. He started the year in the minor leagues, which we accepted as he's just working his way back. They're being really careful with him. They're not comfortable pitching him in back-to-back days. They called him up in May 4th. He was here for 13 days before he got sent back down, came back up, had 2 weeks here between June 19th and July 3rd, and then unfortunately got hurt. Tommy John surgery, IL stint. But now I present to you the man who won an award. It's not the best of the Syracuse train. It's the guy who somehow, some way ended up with so many different roster spots on this team. Now, this guy ended up making 5 appearances for the New York Mets. He threw 9 1/3 innings and only allowed 1 run and actually earned a victory. So pretty good numbers. But I want you to keep in mind, he had 9 1/2 innings or 9 1/3 innings and 4 appearances. What have I told you? Austin Warren had 8 different points in which he was on the Met roster. He was on the roster and then sent down 8 different times, double the amount of appearances he had as a New York Met. Are you ready? Hold on. May 2nd to 3rd, gets sent down. He comes back on May 4th as the 27th man, gets sent down. Comes back on June 22nd, goes down. Same day. Comes back on July 2nd, gets sent down. Comes back on July 3rd, lasts until July 5th, gets sent down. Comes back on July 10th, gets sent down. July 11th to the 13th, gets sent down. August 3rd to August 4th, we never saw him again. 8 different roster moments with us and pitched really well, including getting a victory. I have to give him a grade. I give him a B, though it's literally 9 innings over the course of a year in which they played a lot of innings. Next up on the Syracuse train was Genesis Cabrera. Remember him? He actually only had 1 stint with the New York Mets. It was for about a month. We saw him in spring training. I remember Hoff was kind of okay with him making the team. He made 6 appearances, pitched 7 2/3 innings, pitched to a 3.52 ERA. I don't remember much about Genesis Cabrera. Then you've got Brandon Waddell. What a run for Brandon Waddell. He was here 5 different times, and I thought did a really, really solid job. He went out, made a start, ended up throwing 31 innings with 11 appearances. He was one of those guys, and there's such a value to this over the course of 162. I mean, if they made the playoffs, I'd feel better about this, where we need you to save our bullpen, eat 3 or 4 innings. And I would say Brandon Waddell was probably one of the best at doing that. So right now, he's the leader in the Syracuse Train Player of the Year award, which, yeah, we should hand out at the end of this. Next up is Chris Davinsky. Chris Davinsky had 6 different appearances with the New York Mets on the roster. April 30th to May 1st, May 30th to June 2nd, June 21st to the 24th, July 4th to the 22nd. Then he got DFA'd. They brought him back August 30th to the 31st, and then September 18th to the 21st before he got DFA'd. Another one of those relievers who was so good here. He ended up pitching to a 2.16 ERA through 16 and a third innings. And yeah, I think if the Mets weren't in any kind of roster crunch, Davinsky probably would have been here for longer. Take this into account. Chris Davinsky appeared in 13 games. 13 games. He only allowed runs in 3 of those games. So he was really, really good. And he did a good job of eating innings. Remember that game against the Miami Marlins where they gave up a ton of runs? David Peterson took a dump on the mound. Chris Davinsky pitched 3 scoreless innings that day that kept them in the game. There were examples like that littered throughout the year. He is another candidate, along with Waddell, for the Syracuse Train Player of the Year. Next up is Kevin Herget. Kevin Herget was up here for a while, including the very end. 5 different appearances with this team. April 29th to the 30th, July 19th to the 22nd, August 27th and 28th, September 2nd to the 7th, and September 25th to the 27th. A lot of different appearances, especially, actually finishing his season here. Overall, Kevin Herget for the New York Mets this year. He pitched to a even 3 ERA, 12 innings, 11 hits. Solid work. You know what you realize going through the Syracuse train? More times than not, the guys did good jobs. They really did. I mean, you've got the guys you forget, like Zach Pop and Joel Pintaro, who weren't good, or Tyler Zuber. But Justin Garza was good. Jose Castillo was mostly good. Austin Warren was good. I forgot about Ty Adcock. Ty Adcock was here and made 2 different appearances, May 1st and 2nd, June 15th and 19th. He too was good. Made 3 appearances, 3 innings, 1 run. This is the only area where David Stearns did a pretty good job. The Syracuse train was actually really good. It may have been the best part of our pitching. We have a couple of guys left. Don't worry. We've got Jose Urena. He sucked. He was here briefly, only April 27th to the 29th before he got DFA'd. Max Kranick ended up sort of on the Syracuse train. He was on the team to begin the year, actually won a very early in the season Rico, I'm the man right now, star of the series, but got sent down on April 16th for roster reasons, came back on the 17th after an injury, went down on June 3rd, came back on June 13th, and unfortunately, he too needed a major surgery and went on the IL on June 19th. Kind of a lost year for Kranick. I had high hopes for him. I think a lot of us did, especially with the way he looked in the spring training and the way he looked early in the regular season. And finally, the last member of the Syracuse train is the Pete Hoffman look-like himself, Justin Hagenman. Hagenman had 5 different appearances. And joining us right now, Justin Hagenman. Justin, you had a
Hey, thank you. Man. I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I hope you give me a good grade.
I mean, here's the thing about you. You're not Brandon Waddell. Like, if I'm picking on the Syracuse train who did the best job, I think Hagenman gets honorable mention. I think it's either Brandon Waddell or Chris Davinsky. So, by the way, Hoff is jumping in the middle of his overnight show to show you his versatility. I'm going to go with Chris Davinsky as the Syracuse Rider of the Year. What say you?
I 100% am on board with that. I think I said that a couple times. Davinsky's my guy. I can't believe he didn't make the playoff roster. Oh, wait, they didn't make the playoffs. I can't believe he didn't stay. Like, that's my problem. I don't understand why they kept on sending him down. I guess they could, or just getting rid of him. I guess they could never felt threatened by it, but he was effective. He was really effective. I would definitely give it to him.
It's amazing. We did a Rico talking about the starters. We're going to do a Rico coming up in a few days, going more in depth on the relievers, the ones that were here most of the year. But honestly, going through this Syracuse train is a reminder that this may have been the best aspect of David Stearns' job, because a lot of these names really pitch well. A lot of these names saved the bullpen when the starting pitchers were crapping the bed. So overall, when you go through a lot of these guys we just went through, most of them did a pretty good job. But I agree with you. Chris Davinsky, Brandon Waddell, Justin Hagenman, Rico Garcia, who should have been here longer. A lot of good contributions from the Syracuse train.
Yeah, and it's weird because, we sit here and go, why were other guys in the bullpen longer? Why did we give other guys more opportunity when you actually had guys that were effective? But I guess there's a method to David Stern's madness, and unfortunately, it didn't work out on all ends this year.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, and we're going to go through this next year too, it's all about contracts. It's about who has guaranteed contracts, who you can DFA and get back. Because I was saying this about Rico Garcia or even Chris Davinsky. Chris Davinsky got DFA'd multiple times, and yet the Mets were able to bring him back. Now, coming up on the Rico, I'll give you a little menu over the next few days. We will grade the rest of the relievers, and we will grade David Stearns. But the episode I'm looking forward to, and this will be next week here on the Rico Brogna, it's going to be a long one. I'm going to warn you, it's going to get very, very geeky if we haven't got geeky enough for you. We are going to do an in-depth look at how the New York Mets pulled off the impossible by going 0-70 when trailing after 8 innings. It is a requested deep dive. Received an email from a diehard Met fan and a diehard Rico listener who said, you guys need to do this deep dive. And I said, you know what? You're damn right. We are going to do this deep dive. So we are going to try to figure out how they went 0-70, if the stat is a little bit misleading, if there were opportunities for them to do it. Really, every aspect of one part of the Mets in 2025 that is still unexplainable. How they went 0-70. So we continue to review this season, and coming up, before you know it, we will start to look towards free agency and trade ideas and get you ready for the offseason that is almost upon us.
Now, I know that this was a huge delay because of the ALDS Game 5. Did you make your pick for the NLDS Game 5?
I did not. Thank you for telling me that. You want me to make a pick? The people want me to make a pick. I understand. It's very popular here on the Rico when I make my FanDuel Sportsbook pick. And so my pick is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. So I've gone back and forth about this. And I am going to pick a money line for the Chicago Cub-Milwaukee Brewer Game 5, which is Saturday night. And I'm taking the Cub money line at plus 120. I kind of have a feeling that after the way they were able to survive in Chicago and the way that crowd was basically able to scare Freddie Peralta, that the Cubbies are going to seal the deal and hand the Brewers another heartbreaking loss. So my pick is Chicago money line plus 120 to advance to the National League Championship Series. That was the pick segment brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. We appreciate you listening and downloading the Rico Brogna. Remember to subscribe, download it, rate it, review it, do whatever the hell you have to do. Thank you very much for hanging out with us on another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.